on the Newman Jets Audio Network. This is the Jetcast, the official podcast of Newman University Athletics, featuring exclusive interviews with coaches, players, administrators, and more. The Jetcast podcast is brought to you by South Central Ceiling and Paving, online at SCSEALING.com. Mel Hambledon Ford, Pepsi, Allstate Insurance Agent Mike Light, Eck Agency, Donlinger Construction, Big Corner Creative, Dr. Brennan Lucas and Advanced Orthopedic Associates, Keystone Solid Surfaces, and by Overland Charters, the official transportation provider of Newman University Athletics. Here's the voice of the Newman Jets, Blake Cripps.
The Newman Jet bowling team finally underway for their season, just underway last week with a couple of victories, both the men and the women taking first place at the SWIBC 1 and 2 tournaments. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the Jetcast. Blake Cripps here, and we are talking bowling this week as they are off to a first-place start on the year. Of course, joining me is the head coach of the men and the women here at Newman University Bowling, and that, of course, would be Billy Murphy. Billy, so fantastic to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, obviously, it had been quite a while since you guys had been in competition. First of all, you're finally underway. How much were you looking forward to this, to trying to finally get back on the lanes, get some competition? I know when we talked, there was maybe some doubt, some question as to whether or not a season was going to happen, but there is a schedule. You can find it at newmanjets.com, and obviously it's so great to just actually get underway and just get some pins knocked down.
Yeah, I think it's obviously been a crazy world, and not knowing whether we were going to get to compete. But our governing body has decided that it's important that we get these athletes going and continue to try to compete. But it was just awesome to be back on the lanes. You know, no matter what the result would have been this weekend, just getting our athletes back out there and getting them competing against other teams. We practiced the whole first semester, and in any sport, you can only go so long looking across at another person and it always being your teammate.
That's right.
You always want to get out there and you want to compete against other schools and kind of see where you are and how to get better and all that goes on with coaching and being an athlete. So it was just wonderful to be back out on the lanes.
Well, and obviously, sure, you'd like to get back out on the lanes, but boy, when the men and the women both win the events, that's a pretty special way to start the year.
Yeah, it was, and we competed very well. We obviously there's things that we need to get better at over the course of the season, but just seeing them back out there competing and winning is always fun, right?
Yeah, of course.
And part of what you're trying to do. So that part of it was great, and it's just one of those things where just getting back out there and competing and then seeing some success for your athletes, it was just a great way to start the season.
Coming up here on the Jetcast today, we'll be talking with Madison Douglas, a senior from Wichita, off of the women's team. She actually won the individual event last time out for the Bowlers. And we'll also be joined by a sophomore guard from Toronto, Canada, off the men's basketball team, Ian Lee, coming up on this episode of the Jetcast. Was the field any different because of the pandemic? Were there any schools that decided to not participate? Was it smaller than usual? How was the event different this year because of the pandemic?
Yeah, it was a little smaller. I do know that one school, the head coach tested positive, so they decided not to come. But there was 3 other schools that are normally there, just from our area. Wichita State didn't go because they're not even starting school until February 1st.
Right.
So they're not allowed to travel yet. But there was probably 4 or 5 women's teams and probably 8 or 9 men's teams that weren't there because they just haven't started their schedules yet.
Were procedures any different? How have the actual procedures of bowling changed due to coronavirus protocols and social distancing? And how different is it for the student athletes actually getting out there on the lanes?
Yeah, it's this is going to depend on where you're competing.
Sure.
Because we're in Texas. They didn't have any fans, which was a good thing. There was more room to move around in the bowling center because the bowling centers are usually pretty packed. We were wearing masks at all times. In Texas, they're going to let you bowl. You have to wear your mask all the time, but when you get on the lane, you can pull your mask down.
Sure.
When we compete in our event here in 2 weeks, that will not be the case. You will have to have the mask on at all times. There will be nobody in the bowling center except the athletes. And they had a few more people down there because they're big bowling centers, so they basically just cut the competition area down and didn't allow anybody into that area. So it's going to depend on where you're at, where you're competing. I would tell you the protocols that we've put in place for our event are pretty strict because we just want to try to protect the athletes as much as we can.
And of course, that would be the Mid-States Championship. That'll be coming up on the 6th and the 7th right here in Wichita. When you think about the fact that there are not going to be any fans at all, obviously when you're at a bowling event, sometimes they can provide, a pretty exciting atmosphere for the athletes. What kind of a mental adjustment was it for them? Obviously they made it very well to win both events, but the kind of mental adjustment that you need to make in order to succeed in an environment when it's a lot more like a scrimmage, although I'm sure, the team still got chirpy when things were going well, but obviously a much different atmosphere for these athletes to be competing in.
Yeah, it is. And we talk a lot, in the past and now to generate our own momentum. So I think things that we have done in the past have prepared us for something like this because we do, we have our units there together. They're always standing together. They're talking and communicating. But we try to generate our own momentum most of the time, which also will create an environment where when you do have lows, you kind of get out of those lows quicker. But it is a totally different environment, not having fans there, not having parents there. We live streamed our event.
Right.
We bought some technology and got that up and running so our parents could watch. So that's a little bit different too, because that's not something that normally happens.
Sure.
But it's definitely a strange environment looking back and not seeing parents, not seeing fans.
Obviously, looking up at the scoreboard and seeing first place next to the Newman name, that's not that strange. And the men went off to a 34-pin win over Drury, and then it seems like you guys won by 200 in the second one on the men's side. So obviously they did very well. Did they surpass your expectations? Were you surprised, or were you kind of expecting to go in and get a victory?
Yeah, I think we were going in expecting to win, and honestly, that's kind of our mindset all the time.
Sure.
But it's one of those things like, as the coach this time, under what we've been through, I wasn't sure how the athletes were going to react.
Right.
And the first day was kind of one of those perfect storms. The lane conditions were really hard. It was our first time out. We've got some new players in there, and it just took us a little while to get going on the guys' side. And they struggled through that. But responded well later in the day when they had to make a run, because I think at one point we're in fourth place. But the last couple games, they found their rhythm a little bit and got going and got the victory.
Also, as part of that victory, had some really good individual performances, which obviously in an individual sport you need to have. But Tyler Sinovec ended up getting third place overall in the event, and a couple other ones were right there close in the top 10. So in terms of leadership for him, how good was that to see him come out right out of the gate and be a leader and get third place?
It was great. He's been working hard in practice, and he's actually been throwing it awesome since we got back. So I think he worked pretty hard over the break when he was home. And it was great to see him do well.
On the women's side, obviously, they also won their event. And Madison Douglas, who we'll talk to here from Wichita on the next segment of the show, she actually won the whole darn thing for the women. So talk about the ladies' side and obviously her with an individual championship to start the year. Pretty fantastic for a player last year. I think I wrote this down, 178.3 average last year in 12 events. And for her to come out out right out of the gate and get a victory like that obviously sets the tone on the women's side.
Yeah, it does. And Madison's one of our hardest workers. We don't ever have to worry about Madison being in the bowling center practicing. She's pretty hard on herself, I think, sometimes, but she has great work ethic, and it was great to see her come out. I know, her and I have been working a little bit, and she was struggling 2 weeks ago a little bit, but I think last week before we left, she really kind of found her rhythm. And it was good to see her continue that on during the event, and averaging 195 on what we bowled on. Tremendous showing, because the condition they laid down on that first day, it was pretty rough, and she just kept it in play, kept hitting the pocket, clean frames, all the things that we talk about. So it was great to see her bowl well.
Were there any surprise performances by either team, player that maybe stepped up that you weren't necessarily expecting them to finish where they did?
Yeah, the second day on the guys' side, Justin Pashanik, who 3 years ago, he's out of Derby, Kansas. He came in and he had great physical skills, but he wasn't really there. And, he led the second day and averaged over 230. And he has come so far in his time here, and it was just great to see him do that. And then we had good performances from Chaston Pohas and James McIver, two sophomores. And from where they were last year as freshmen, the growth rate for those two guys has just been really, really nice to see. And I think they're going to get a lot of playing time the rest of the year. Final
question for you, Coach. Obviously, your home event, the one home event that you'll have this year, the Mid-States Championship, February 6th and 7th in Wichita here in about a week and a half or so, which is about the normal cadence. You guys bowl typically weekly or every other week,
yep.
And that's about what it's going to be this year. Obviously, season starting a little bit later than it normally would, but final question for you, just give us a preview of that event. What do you expect to see out of your team there, and what other competition do you expect to see, and how will that kind of compare to what you faced in your first events? Yeah, it's going to be a bigger field. Right now we have 20 women's schools, and we have, I think, 23 men's schools. We hope that all that will go well over the next couple weeks, and we'll get them all here, but we're probably going to have 8 or 9 of the top 20 teams in the country. Wow. That will be at the event on both sides. So the competition's going to be strong, and it'll be a nice test for us and kind of see where we're at going into the second half of the season. We'll see if the Jets can make it 2 in a row. Once again, that Mid-States Championship, 6th and 7th, and I'm assuming that will be a no-fan situation, as you mentioned. If somebody wants to keep track of this event, if they want to watch it, maybe there's live stats, something like that, where can they get access to that? Yeah, we've actually set up 2 YouTube channels, one for the Newman men's and one for the Newman women's. And if you go on and put those in there and subscribe to our channel, it's free to watch. Okay. So that is how you can follow them on YouTube. And, of course, Colin will have all the updates at NewmanJets.com after the event with recaps and standings. So you can look for that as well on NewmanJets.com. And also, you guys are Newman Jets Bowl. Where are you guys on Twitter? Oh, gosh. It's Newman Jets Bowl. Newman Jets Bowl on Twitter, so you can follow the team along with that as well. Coach Billy Murphy, I appreciate the time so much. Thank you for being here. Yeah, as always, thanks for having us. We've got one of the leaders on the women's side for bowling coming up next from right here in Wichita.
Hi, I'm Alex Stevenson with South Central Sealing and Paving. We specialize in parking lot maintenance. We do asphalt repair, crack seal, seal coat, slurry seal, concrete repair, striping. Heck, I'll do anything for money. My dignity can be bought. Do property management, trash pickup, snow removal. My kids gotta eat. And hey, if you need any carpet or anything like that, call my dad, Jeff Stevenson, at Harry Street Carpet. You tell him I look better than him on camera, he'll give you a 20% discount. We're South Central Sealing. Let us fill the cracks in your asphalt.
Back here on episode 33 of the Jetcast, getting set for bowling coming up here in just a couple of days. As I mentioned, right here in Wichita, the only home event of the year for the Jets. And joining me now is the first women's bowler we've had on the program this year, Madison Douglas, a senior from right here in Wichita, a former Eisenhower Tiger, Goddard Eisenhower High School product. 178.3 average last year in 12 events, but she did just win the opening event of the year for the Newman women's bowling team. Madison Douglas joins me here on the Jetcast. Thank you so much for being here, Madison.
Thanks for having me.
Obviously, first of all, congratulations. And I'll ask you the same question that I asked Coach Murphy. How excited were you just to be able to get out there on the lanes and actually have a chance to compete instead of just practicing all the time? That had to be so refreshing to get out there in competition.
It was very refreshing. It was just exciting to be out there, being with the team, seeing how we were going to do, and it was just really exciting.
How did you use the off season, and how challenging was the off season in terms of getting your prep in, getting your work in order to get ready for your senior year?
It was challenging. I had a couple rough patches, but I just kept pushing through. I practiced almost probably 4 days a week, just trying to get ready and prepared for season.
He had mentioned when we talked last segment that there were a couple of rough stretches when you weren't bowling as well. Obviously, you were able to overcome that. When you were going into the event, how did you feel about the prep that you had put in the off season? How confident were you that you were ready?
I was a little unsure, to be honest, going in. I knew I had worked hard and was prepared as I could be, but...
Well, obviously, when you get a payoff like that, it certainly makes everything worth it, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Well, and when did you know, I mean, because I'm not a good bowler, so I don't have, I step onto the lanes and I pretty much never have confidence, but I'm assuming that when you're a seasoned bowler and you step up to the line, you can kind of tell when maybe you were taking a practice shot early on, like, okay, I got it today. When did you know in those events that, like, okay, I've got my A game here for these events this week?
Probably during practice. I was throwing it as good as I wanted to be, and that first game I knew it was my time to shine.
He said that the oil pattern was pretty difficult. How difficult was it compared to what you guys normally throw on, and how much more difficult was that maybe because of the complete lack of competition that you had this year, and starting with such a rough, how challenging was it to start with such a rough pattern right out of the gate in your first event?
It was pretty challenging. I had to really make sure I didn't get the ball out as far as I normally do. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but I knew if I changed my angles a little bit, I'd be able to do what I wanted.
How important is it to have flexibility? Because I know in any sport, there's a certain key that you have to winning. Maybe that would be different for one of your teammates, for the guys on the team, but something that you know that you have to focus on in order to win. What do you feel like some of those keys are for you?
I just have to focus on getting the ball to the target, making sure that I make my spares, obviously. Just being really focused on what I'm doing.
In addition to that, bowling is kind of unique in that, unlike any other sport, with the exception of golf, and I haven't forgot about you, Coach. We're going to have Coach Torg. We're going to have golf back on here one of these days. The playing field for most sports is pretty much the same. But in bowling, obviously, while it doesn't make any bit of difference what the oil pattern is for players like me, for players like you who actually can control the ball and know what they're doing, it can be a world of difference out there on the lanes when you have to make an adjustment. How do you allow yourself to have flexibility with keeping to your keys, keeping to your game plan, but needing to adapt it to maybe a certain lane condition that favors your strengths, or maybe one that plays against your strengths and plays into your weaknesses?
I think really communicating with everyone else, because not everyone throws the ball the same, but we can align ourselves up just by communicating with one another and seeing how they're moving.
How huge was that for you guys to come out of the gate and win a women's team championship, first event of the year? I know that it's an individual game, but, it's molded into a team concept. And how big was that to start with a first place finish in the column there to start the year?
It was amazing. Our team chemistry was really, really good, which really helped. Everyone was just working really well together, so it was really huge for us.
Obviously, you've got a home event coming up. It'll be the Mid-States Championship in just a couple of weeks here in February, first weekend of February, 6th and 7th. It will be a little bit different, not having the fans around. How much are you looking forward to that event? But at the same time, with it being your senior year, it would be great to have fans and family, especially with you from right here in Wichita and went to school in Goddard. So there could be a lot of local fan support for the team. I know there always is, but how do you mentally make that adjustment with a much, much different atmosphere at a bowling event than maybe there would otherwise be?
I think just knowing that they're watching. I have my teammates, and we hype each other up, so I don't really pay attention to the fans as much.
Sure.
But I think just knowing that they're watching how we're doing is good enough for me.
So question for you. We had a male bowler on last time, and Coach Murphy got to ask him a question. He's asking you a question, and he knows that you, like a lot of student athletes, I am sure, have to split some time in between the classroom, training for your sport, and also doing a little part-time work. So he wants to know, how do you keep that work-life balance? How do you do your time management to make sure you've got time to go to school, to go to work, help pay your bills, and then obviously circle back around and get practice time in at the lanes?
Time management is huge. If you don't have it, you're kind of screwed.
Well, that's rather fun, isn't it?
But I just make sure I do my homework at the beginning of the week, or even on the weekends. Just make sure I have everything done by when it's due.
What are you studying?
I'm a criminal justice major.
Wow, okay, criminal justice. Obviously, there are several different ways that you could go with that major. Here in this spring after you graduate, obviously we're assuming, you'll have a lot of different options of where to go. Have you identified which branch of that you'd like to maybe pursue here after graduation?
I have not.
No, and that's okay. Maybe more schooling, is that a possibility?
I actually have one more semester.
One more semester, okay.
Possibly two.
Okay, so maybe one more year of school. There's nothing wrong with that. Final question for you, thinking about on the lanes, what are your goals for your senior year? Obviously, last year you were about, I think, 5th on the average on the team, but obviously you can kind of change your expectations after winning an individual title to start the season. How do you stay grounded, stay humble, and kind of stay hungry, even though you had that early success, and keep pushing it forward and make it 2, 3, maybe 4 event championships?
Just keep working as hard as I've been. I'd like to stay top 3 average.
Okay.
But nothing too big.
Madison Douglas, senior from Wichita, from Goddard Eisenhower High School, winner of the first women's event for the Jets individually this year. Once again, they're at the Mid-States Championship coming up on the 6th and the 7th. You can find the Newman Jets bowling teams on YouTube to follow along live right here in Wichita. Best of luck to you in those events, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will have Ian Lee, sophomore point guard off the men's basketball team, joining us next as we wrap up the Jetcast after this.
The Jetcast is sponsored by Dr. Brendan Lucas with Advanced Orthopedics, the official orthopedic surgeon of Newman Athletics. Thank you to Donlinger Construction, proud supporter of Newman Athletics.
Fact is, every insurance company hopes you drive safely. But Allstate actually helps you drive safely with DriveWise. It lets you know when you go too fast and brake too hard, with feedback to help you drive safer, giving you the power to actually lower your cost. Unfortunately, you can't do anything about that. Now that you know the truth, are you in good hands?
Check out your Allstate agent here in Wichita, Mike Light, at 316-684-0121.
Wrapping up the Jetcast, talking men's basketball. Last time out, the Jets put a scare into the number 3 team in the country, Northwest Missouri. They are back in action with another top 25 team coming in here to Wichita, the Washburn Ichabods. And joining me to talk all about it, sophomore point guard from Toronto, Canada, transferred from Howard University, Ian Lee, here as we wrap up the Jetcast. Ian, thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
8 points per game, 20 assists. You lead the team, just to give the fans some superlatives for you. Last time out, 81-70 loss at number 3 Northwest Missouri State. Certainly wish I could have been there, but we actually watched it in this room as we called and described the action.
Okay.
And from R.J. Allen's perspective, talking to him on the phone after the game, he said that the atmosphere was a little bit different because there were more fans allowed there than there had been in any of your other games this year. Mm-hmm. How did you guys notice that atmosphere, and how did you think it affected you early on in that game at Northwest Missouri?
It was definitely noticeable. Coming from other teams and other gyms where there's virtually no fans, they had a cheer squad, a whole band, and a good number of fans in the stand, and it was noticeably more loud. And in terms of how it affected us, I mean, it didn't really have much effect. We sort of just played how we played and sort of blocked out the noise. But of course, it was noticeably louder.
Well, and you guys early on, Northwest Missouri State was having success. They got out to a 28-14 lead, and you kind of got the feeling that the game was at a tipping point. You guys found threes, rallied back, trailed by only 2, and actually had the lead for much of the second half against the defending national champions, the defending MIAA champions. What allowed you guys to turn that around with Northwest Missouri State? It looked like they were going to try to run away with it, and instead, obviously, you guys gave them one of their closest games of the year.
Right. I say we just looked at each other and we just started, believing and just playing free, because our what we need to do is not really look at our opponent, but look more at ourselves. And when we play like that, when we play free, when we play with belief, we can compete. I believe we can compete with anybody in the country, and that's sort of what we did. And when we sort of started rallying back, we realized that it doesn't matter who we're playing, just play basketball.
You guys have taken some tough losses this year. How have you tried to personally bounce back mentally, and how's the team been trying to bounce back mentally from those setbacks?
Yeah, our coaches have been a great job, just constantly preaching to us, stay with it, stay the course, keep believing, just keeping at it, and that what we're going through, it could be looked at as a blessing in a sort of way. And the atmosphere in the locker room is, it's not one that feels like our record. It's one sort of with hope, and as long as we keep working and believing, I think it'll be fun.
You are just a sophomore on this team, but watching you out on the court, as the starting point guard, you're kind of thrust into a leadership position, and it seems like you already kind of provide that calming influence on the court. What do you attribute that leadership quality to in yourself?
Well, I've been a point guard since I started playing basketball at the age of 4, and sort of, it's really the confidence that the coaches have in me that I'm able to, play the way that I play, provide this calming influence, and it's really my teammates that always have my back out there that, it's why I'm able to play.
So obviously a leader as a sophomore, freshman year at Howard. What was that experience like playing at Howard University?
It was a great experience. It was definitely different. It was before COVID, it had a lot more fans, a lot louder.
Sure.
Sort of in the Division I environment. It was an HBCU, so it was a great experience. I learned a lot from it, and I wouldn't take anything from it.
Obviously, in practice, when you have close losses, I know you've had a couple of performances that you guys would like to have back this year, and Coach Allen has really challenged you guys in practice. How have you seen the mood in practice? How's the mood been in practice this week after that close Northwest Missouri State loss?
It's all about getting better. It's all about learning from our loss. It's all about taking the things we did well as well as the things we did not do well, and improving on those in this practice week. And that's sort of what we start to do every single time we step on the court.
When you're a player, the coaches are in charge of getting a lot of things organized and being able to plan things out for you guys. Mm-hmm. This year, obviously, and I know it was way different at Howard at the Division I level last year pre-coronavirus. Right. How do you allow yourself to have flexibility when you're dealing with so many different schedule changes that take you out of your normal every game day-to-day routine?
You just it's tough, but you just got to sort of realize that you're still blessed to be playing.
Right.
Like, we could not play at all, and there's a lot of teams and players in the country that aren't playing at all. And if that's the price to pay with all these procedures and all these, hassles, I guess, but it's really no price to pay.
How have you been able to keep in touch with your family in Canada? And were you able, when the pandemic first hit, were you able to go home to Canada? Did you stay here in the United States? And how's it been trying to stay a little bit separate from your family north of the border?
Yeah, actually in March when, it sort of blew up and whatever, right from the conference tournament at Howard, I went straight home. And, I had to quarantine for really about like 2 to 3 months. And, it was tough. It was weird. Like, I thought, I'd go back to school. It would be all over. But no, look what it is now. Yeah,
it's not quite over. Oh, we're hopefully turning the corner. What do you feel like is the strength of your game? Early on in the year, you had been mostly a distributor, but here in the second half of the season, you've shown that you can hit the outside shot. And you've been an important part of the offense, scoring points lately too.
Yeah, a lot of the coaching staff, they just really put that confidence in me to, if I have a shot, shoot it, and I'm glad that I'm hitting sort of stride right now. And what's most important, that I don't get complacent, is that I try to keep it going for my team, of course. So, yeah.
Final questions for you here, two about the Washburn Ichabods. First of all, obviously that was a challenging loss up there in Topeka. They're a really good team, one of the top 5 teams in the country at one point this year. They'll be knocked down. They lost Emporia State last time out, so they won't be 7th, but they're still going to be in the top 15 100%. What do you remember about that Washburn game? It was a 100-61 loss. Obviously, just because you guys lost that game doesn't mean you're necessarily going to lose this one. But Washburn got off to a fast start and really kind of steamrolled it there in the second half. What was the biggest challenge they presented to you the first matchup that you had in Lee Arena?
I believe it was our first road game.
Yes, it was. You're correct.
And so, we coming up on the road for the first time as a new team in a new gym, and like sort of that environment is difficult to play with. But as Coach Allen said, like, we're 0-0 right now, and we have 11 games left, and all that matters is the 11 games. It doesn't matter our result at Washburn last time. We're just playing ourselves. Final
question for you then. You've got those 11 games left, as you mentioned, about 1 full month of the season or so, plus a week left. Mm-hmm. What are your goals for yourself, and what are your goals for the team over this 11-game stretch?
Personally, for myself, it's just to keep playing confident, keep playing free, and just try my best to have fun and do as much as I can with the team, But as a team, I believe, our mindset going in is to win all 11 games. And, I believe we can compete with anyone in the country, and why can't we win 11 games, right? And that's how we're going into it.
Ian Lee, the Newman Jets men's basketball team, they are back in action on Thursday. You can hear that game on the Newman Jets Audio Network. Double-header coverage starts at 5:30 from right here in Fugate Gymnasium as the Jets get set for doubleheader coverage against the Washburn Ichabods. Ian, good luck. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
That is our show for this week. We'll be back next week. I think we're going to have some baseball on next week. So baseball fans have got you covered next week. So stay tuned for that. So until next time, Blake Cripps saying go Jets.